Z and Diddy's accuser is saying that she's terrified after she was intimidated by private investigators. The Jane Doe that dismissed her lawsuit against Diddy and Jay-Z is saying that private investigators were sent to her to intimidate her and terrify her to get her to lie and say that all of her claims were false. And now Jay-Z is suing this Jane Doe and Tony Buzbee again in a whole new lawsuit, so we're about to break all of this down because to me it's crazy. Before this Jane Doe named Jay-Z in her lawsuit, Jay-Z actually filed a lawsuit against Tony Buzbee for extortion for the demand letters that he got for this lawsuit. And about a week ago, on February 27th of 2025, the judge told Jay-Z that he was going to dismiss his extortion claims against Tony Buzbee unless he brought him hard proof evidence that Tony Buzbee was extorting him, because a demand letter is not extortion. Now, he didn't finalize his order during this court hearing, but said that he may change his mind only if Jay-Z's lawyers present evidence showing that Tony Buzbee sought money from Jay-Z with no plans to sue and without the consent of his client. He said if he could show evidence, that would be extortion perhaps, but he wants to see the silver bullet before he allows it to be fired. After the judge delayed this hearing, a partner at Quinn Emanuel in Los Angeles said that an investigator spoke with someone who said that Tony Buzbee sent 2 demand letters to Carter without the knowledge of the 2 clients identified as Jane Doe and John Doe. He said, though, that he doesn't believe that the investigator can publicly name his source. After the judge said that he wanted to dismiss the extortion claims because they didn't have any evidence, he told them that they need to submit this new evidence sooner than later if they're going to do so. And this is where the Jane Doe admits that she was having private investigators sent to her house allegedly by Jay-Z to try to intimidate her and lie and sign an affidavit saying that her claims were false. She said on Friday, February 21st of 2025, she was approached at her house by 2 individuals, a woman and a large man. They cornered her on her front porch and told her that they were investigators working for the attorney on behalf of Jay-Z. They asked her if she would be willing to sign an affidavit stating that her claims in the New York action were false, but she refused. They also asked if Tony Buzbee sought her out as a client and whether Tony Buzbee offered to pay her to pursue a false claim against Jay-Z. Mind you, in this same case against Tony Buzbee where this Jane Doe is saying all of this, Jay-Z and his counsel have not submitted the evidence that they said that they had. Now, this Jane Doe said that she told the private investigators that neither of those things ever happened, and she asked them to leave her alone. She said that she felt intimidated and terrified at being confronted by these 2 individuals on her doorstep, and that they knew her name and her home address despite her being anonymous in the New York lawsuit. She also said that she understands that investigators approached her father and mother multiple times. 2 investigators approached my father and mother as my father was picking my mother up from a medical appointment, asking them similar questions about Mr. Buzbee and if he had paid for me, and requesting that they sign affidavits stating that my claims were false. She said that her father was separately approached later on at a gas station and her mother was separately approached at a store. Her parents refused to sign any affidavits and denied the investigators' claims about her case and Tony Buzbee's conduct and asked to be left alone. She said that it was very alarming for her that Jay-Z's agents were looking for her and now know her whereabouts. She said that she had fear of retaliation and intimidation from Jay-Z and his associates or fans, and this is one of the reasons why she chose not to pursue the New York lawsuit and instructed her attorney Tony Buzbee to dismiss it. She then goes on to state even though she ultimately chose not to pursue them, she stands by her claims in her New York lawsuit, and she believed that she had valid claims against Jay-Z. And Tony Buzbee has also spoke out and said that he's ignored salacious and false stories about him that are nothing more than an effort to stop him from doing his important work. He said that he sent a demand letter for a meeting to Sean Carter's attorneys on behalf of 2 individuals who alleged SA, but rather than meet with him, Jay-Z's team sued him for extortion. Those claims were frivolous and I expect them to be thrown out. Note that it was Carter's team that made this whole entire thing public. Jay-Z's lawyer also came to Houston and met me with local authorities and tried to get criminal charges started against me that went nowhere. They then tracked down and harassed former employees and clients from as far back as 20 years ago, and they were caught on tape offering up to 10 grand to former clients to sue me. 3 did so. All cases were frivolous. One case has already been dismissed, and I expect that the other two will be dismissed. And when Tony Buzbee says this, he's talking about those private investigators, one that he caught a picture of, and it's the same man that was going around questioning content creators. And right now in Texas, Rock Nation has multiple lawsuits against them from Tony Buzbee's former clients, alleging that these private investigators were sent to them and offered them money to file fake lawsuits against Tony Buzbee. Now, he said that Jay-Z's team filed meritless motions for sanctions against him and challenged his admission to the federal court in New York and filed a state bar grievance against him. And this is where it gets really nasty. He alleged they found my client who had filed the lawsuit. They threatened and harassed her. They harassed her family and friends. She has health issues, she has seizures, and she withdrew her case. They then sued her and me again for defamation. They have already sued me for defamation, and most of that case is being thrown out. And he's talking about the California case that we just talked about. He said, pay attention here. They wanted a headline, so in that new case, they falsely claimed that she recanted. She didn't, she hasn't, she won't. After Jane Doe put her statements out in that extortion lawsuit in California, Jay-Z just yesterday sued Tony Buzbee and this Jane Doe in an Alabama court. In Jay-Z's lawsuit, he said he first became aware of her identity in or around February 21st of 2025, but he has never met or interacted with her. And this is the same day that this Jane Doe is saying that she was approached by these private investigators who alleged that they were working for an attorney on behalf of Jay-Z. You guys remember when the Jane Doe did that NBC interview on December 13th of 2024? 3 days later, when Alex Spiro made this press conference about the whole allegations on the NBC interview, one thing I found super weird was his allegations about this Jane Doe. Just take a listen.
Do you know who the Jane Doe is, like her actual identity? Has there been like research into that on your end?
Yeah, it's a fair question because she's been blacked out in the video and because a court has not unmasked her in court. I'm not going to get into her identity. You will notice that I did not get into some of her issues. I don't want to. It's really sad in many respects, and I don't want to get into that. So I'm not going to unmask her here today.
In my opinion, that was a very odd way to talk about this Jane Doe's identity that was unknown, according to Jay-Z, until February 21st, and this was December 16th. In Jay-Z's lawsuit, he said that he's suing this Jane Doe over what she said in that affidavit about these private investigators in the California court for his extortion lawsuit. Jay-Z is alleging that the Jane Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Jay-Z that her story brought before the world in court on global television was a false, malicious story. She admitted that Jay-Z did not essay her and that indeed it was Tony Buzbee himself who she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston the day of her false NBC interview, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of SA by Jay-Z in order to leverage a maximum payday. But this also makes no sense because her statements are saying totally otherwise. And in this lawsuit, you're saying that your representatives did go to this Jane Doe and talk to her. But she made it seem in her affidavit that you guys approached her and asked her to lie about the situation, and she told you no. And with the lawsuit already dismissed, I don't understand why this is still going on. But in my opinion, the only thing that makes sense why all of this is happening is over those extortion claims in a California lawsuit that Jay-Z filed against Tony Buzbee. Because remember, a little over a week ago, the judge just said if Jay-Z doesn't bring in evidence that he was going to drop Jay-Z's extortion claims against Tony Buzbee. I was also confused why Jay-Z was filing a whole nother lawsuit against Tony Buzbee in Alabama while he still had this one in California. I was also confused why the proof that Jay-Z's claiming that he has that this Jane Doe admitted that she was lying was not submitted in California against Tony Buzbee or in this new Alabama case. I feel like this whole new lawsuit is going to bring up a whole can of worms, and I'm excited to see exactly what happens in this new case. But y'all let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments.